Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me today, KCRA 3, Sean Cunningham. What's up, Sean?
How you doing? I'm good. I'm lighting my podcast candle as we speak. And I will admit, I love today because I don't have to do a goddamn thing except for this podcast. I've been a little busy, fellas. Been a bit busy.
Yeah, I think
I'm
we've
back. I'm home.
We've all felt that busyness. We're also joined by Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you?
Doing well. I just found my Sunrise Woods over here.
Whoa.
Yep.
Careful.
Purposely, being a little misleading for the sake of content. Little candle action going on. Sean made me realize I did not have mine, and I have no clue where a lighter is. Just kidding. I found one.
I have no lighter. I do have my first podcast candle.
Yes.
Isn't it great, James?
Not going to be lit.
Isn't it great?
It smells really good. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to light said candle because I don't have a lighter unless I summons the wife to bring a lighter to the bar.
Do you just clap
Woman,
the hands?
Give me a lighter.
Clap.
Mom, meatloaf.
That's awesome.
Brenden. From
is it
wedding
no,
crashers.
Okay. All right. I thought I knew it. Can I ask one random question since everybody loves when we talk about random crap at the beginning real quick?
Yeah.
It's Girl Scout cookie season. And I just want to know what the best Girl Scout cookie is because I have an answer, but I'm curious.
I don't think there's a wrong answer to be honest, because I think everybody universally agrees that Thin Mints are the best.
Okay, so when I was young, I loved Thin Mints. As I've gotten older, I like the ones that are chocolate covered, and inside there's peanut butter.
Oh, gross!
I know what you're talking about.
You don't like peanut butter, Sean?
I despise peanut butter. First of all, I'll admit I'm in the minority here. I know that people love peanut butter and all things nuts, but
wow.
I am the opposite there. I can't even. You know what a really nauseating moment is for me in life is like being on a plane that serves peanuts and the whole plane just now smells like a cashew or peanut factory. It's repulsive to me.
Haven't they gone away from that though because of the peanut allergy situation?
Yeah, and I don't have one of those, but I'm so glad that they've gone away from that. So I'm glad that the peanut allergy exists.
You're glad that some people need an EpiPen and could die on a plane if someone else opened up some sort of nuts. Okay.
Well, I'm just glad. Yeah, and the answer there is to not serve them anymore. So
sounds like it's possible you might be a bad person, Sean.
I'm just very selfish in that regard. I'm not selfish in a lot of things, but that I am.
That's right.
The right answer is Samoas, by the way.
No, that's not the right answer.
Which one are those?
The Samoas here. Look, I will show you right now. I'll give you.
I think they've even brought in a gross.
These are so good. They don't look the most beautiful. I really like coconut.
What about this? Isn't there like a s'mores one now? Like
I hate coconut. Sure. Can't stand coconut. I like fresh coconut. I don't like any of the shaved coconut variety.
I don't mind coconut, but I don't feel like it goes with like sweet, like with other sweets, like chocolate or something like that. Like coconut is sweet enough. You don't need to go sweet on sweet.
All right. Well, talking about sweet on sweet, let's talk about the Beam Boys. I don't know.
Is that a thing? Is that a thing?
Oh, you missed that.
No, I didn't. I saw it. But that's a thing now. I know Max talked about it last night, which was odd timing because it was after a loss. But I don't know.
Is that a shot at me for asking him?
Did you? Well, no, it's not. I just thought it was a curious time to bring it up.
Some asked him about it, and we don't know who.
I honestly, in fairness, I didn't even realize that was you. But I don't know. At least he had fun with it. I guess it's fine. I'm curious. I think the thing that stood out to me was so there's sunglasses. I was in Seattle, so I missed that part. But everyone busts out sunglasses, and he talked about how we're gonna keep it going. It's gonna evolve into other things. So hella props coming up in the future for this Beam lighting ceremony that they've now coined themselves the Beam Boys, which whatever.
We'll see. We'll see. You know,
I got a
it was
lighter.
either wow.
And you didn't even have to
He
summon.
muted and clapped. Yeah. Yeah, I think
There
it
it
was
is.
either Precious or Max with the idea of the glasses, you know. But I think it's kind of fun. It helps that, you know, you only could do this because they started a little bit of a win streak when you were
Right.
sitting there and just with an absolutely horrible record prior to this, where they were what, like 8-30 or even worse than that. And now it's, you have a little bit more of a reason, I guess, to play into some of that stuff. But it is fun to me to see some of the younger generation, quote unquote, because these aren't exactly the youngest guys in the league or anything when people declare them as young players, especially throwing Precious in that group and some of these other guys. But it's fun to me to see that next generation OKC's interviews, you know, how everybody's huddling around. Like, I think it brings a little bit of a fun energy that, yeah, maybe could bring some sort of life to this team that was very much lacking that at times.
Yeah, this team has lacked life for
Yeah.
sure.
For the record, I'm great with it. I just get maybe another clever name, but yeah, those things are great. All those things are great, and I think you can point really to someone like Dylan Cardwell, who, you know, I was asked. I don't remember if it was even last week on this show or somewhere else, but it was like, yeah, all of a sudden here they are playing better. They had won four straight going into the last night's loss, and like, you know, what's different, or you know, what's the vibe? Like the vibes are always pretty good around the team for the most part. I would argue that apathy had kind of set in at one point, because this team does feel rather indifferent at times, as to what's going on in the, you know, in terms of the product on the court and wins and loss, and that's kind of natural with the record. But I feel like the young guys, their exuberance, their opportunity, and their joy, and I think Doug has really steered into the energy and joy facets of basketball and trying to tap into something there. And I think it's rubbed off on some of these veteran players.
I think so too. I think it's a good group of dudes. I mean, that's kind of where we're at right now in the season. I mean, you wish their record was better than 12-31, but at the same time, they're starting to find themselves a little bit. They're starting to have fun. They're finding the joy of basketball, which I think was lost on a lot of these guys. And it's gone from being just like a group of veterans just trying to get their stats to more of a team over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, I'd say. And even if they haven't won all those games, I do think that there is sort of a positive momentum, if that makes sense. And you know, again, this season doesn't have to be just absolutely horrifically boring and dreadful. There's a possibility that you can do, you know, some of the fun stuff, even if you are losing more games than you're winning. So, you mentioned like the young guys. For me, watching the last couple of games with Domas back, I think it's really interesting. Like I think there was concern that Domas was going to come back and just take all the minutes, and I still think that there is a way in which Domas can play 30 to 35 minutes, Max can play 20, and Precious can play 20, and Dylan can play 20, and you can still fit all of that into like a rotation. Where are you guys at with that? Because so far we've seen very distinct things. Sean is clearly looking at himself in a
I did
phone
notice your eye
camera.
was a little bit red, bud.
Yeah, it's not pink eye. I actually scratched it. I have a scratch like right here.
Oh,
And it's been a little itchy, so I had some ointment on it, so I was making sure that it was not like
goopy and weird. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to the question at hand. Like, where are you
Sorry,
guys at
that's a
with this?
major distraction, right?
Because it does feel like Doug is kind of centered on a tandem of Domas and Dylan, and then Precious and Max. And like, to be honest, it's kind of fun to watch. It's kind of fun to watch the development of these guys.
The Dylan and Domas one is really weird to me. I think that, I mean, the obvious question is spacing with that group, and I think that you saw that play out very much so against Portland. There's other teams, like when you're playing against Washington, for example, they just don't really have a defense out there. So there's not much of, you know, I think teams can easily pack the paint against that team, and it can go a long way when Dylan and Domas are playing together. I don't think we really saw that much against Washington. You saw it more against Portland, and I guess to their credit, the Kings scored decently for the most part in that game. They just did their typical thing where they have one quarter, happen to be the second quarter. They get outscored 32-21, pretty much the game, almost equal throughout the rest of the game in that one. But I do worry about the spacing of that unit a little bit. I think that you're seeing Dillon in that dunker spot, maybe sometimes in the corner. And it's funny to me to see defenders like paying attention to him standing in the corner. I'm like, people are going to realize there's no reason to worry about that, to be honest. Domas's three, I don't think is great at this point, and we'll see what that could look like more. Obviously hasn't played very much. So I am curious to keep tabs on how that unit performs as there's just more reps. I think right now it's hard, obviously a short sample size. I think defensively you can see the logic, obviously. And I'd imagine that's where, it's what Doug always wants to talk about. I'm sure that that's where he is attempting to make an impact there with Dillon's rim protection and what he provides. I think the verticality that we've seen from him all year long, but specifically last night, I thought was phenomenal. He still gets in foul trouble, and that's going to be part of this a little bit, but they don't have rim protection like Dylan Cardwell. Like, he is far and away their best rim protector, even with his own flaws in there a little bit at times as well. And so I think it helps somewhat in ways with that, but I do worry more so long-term that I don't think that could be the most conducive pairing moving forward. But this is also the year where I think you should be trying things. So I'm not really going to sit here and say, why are you doing that necessarily?
Yeah, and especially with Domas coming off of injury. He had to play in 27 games, comes off the bench. I thought he was really good in the first game for what it's worth. Last night against Portland, I thought he brought in intensity. I don't think he I don't think he was terrible. I actually expected him to come back in the game in the fourth quarter. Kind of puzzled as to why he didn't, because Donovan Clingan was just looking like Shaq out there. I mean, he was so dominant. He was even hitting threes. I kind of like the idea of maybe having Cardwell and Sabonis together at times. I think there was a lot of learning experiences for Max last night with that physicality, and particularly with Clingan and how deep he got into the paint. But by and large, I kind of question as to, I don't usually do this, but I felt like if Domantas Sabonis was on the floor last night, they probably would have won the game. Clingan has had problems with Sabonis in the past. Yeah, we saw some pretty interesting lineups. A lot of 4-guard rotations. We had a 5-guard lineup at one point. It was just situational, obviously, but yeah, you had DeRozan was your center. I like the fact that they're playing Monk. I know Keon has been hurt for these past couple games with this sore knee, so it's provided a little bit of interesting rotations, and it just seems like, I'm not saying this as a negative or even a positive. I just think it's still curious that Doug Christie is now here in January 19th. We're approaching a trade deadline, and he's still trying to figure out what he has. I mean, granted, injuries play a part in that, but injuries and who your opposition play a part in that. But I think the opportunity is there for these guys to get some of the, someone like Cardwell and Maxime Raynaud to get these reps and these opportunities and these learning experiences. But I don't think it has to come at the sacrifice of winning. I think the 4-game win streak has injected a little bit of life into this club, but they're still not a good basketball team. I don't want to paint a picture as to say that they're about to make some major move, but yeah, it is interesting. It's just it can be an interesting watch day in and day out. I'll say that.
Yeah, and look, I think first and foremost, I don't think Domas is 100%. I don't think he's anywhere near 100%. I think Doug Christie doesn't like to reveal things like starting lineups. He also doesn't like to reveal things like minutes restrictions. And I think it's pretty interesting that Domas played 20 minutes 2 games in a row.
Yeah.
And that tells me that there's probably a minutes restriction here. But on top of that, what does it look like when they have a back-to-back tomorrow and Wednesday? And I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. Domas seems to be pain-free. I think it's interesting. He's not wearing a sleeve or a brace on his knee at all, just because, you typically would want a little bit of protection there, but he must feel like he's doing okay. He told us he pushed to get back. He wants to play. And so I respect that. I also, I got to be honest, I don't hate the pairing of Domas and Dillon. I do understand, Brenden, your question about spacing, but I think the way that the Kings can combat that is by using Dylan Cardwell as a true rim runner, having him get down in the post, go hide in the dunker spot, and then having a lot of their offense predicated on the pick and roll and the DHO way up top,
Way up top.
draw, Domas and the other players away from the basket. And I don't think it's a coincidence that that Dylan Cardwell had his first double-digit scoring game of his career. He posted his first double-double, scored 12 points and grabbed 10 rebounds. Brenden, was it you that was telling me that Dylan Cardwell has never scored 20 points in a game at any level?
Yeah, Kyle Draper shared a story on our station the other day that an assistant coach told him Dylan has never scored 20 points in his life. And Kyle asked him, and Dylan, for what it's worth, said maybe one time when he was a freshman in high school, because I went back and checked college. He 5 years at Auburn, never higher than 18 points, and that was even an outlier game. So something to me that is crazy impressive to make it to the NBA level, never having scored 20 points. I mean, it very much speaks to the player that Dylan is, the energy, defensive tone setter, and it's very on brand, but also one of the crazier things I feel like I've heard.
It's
That's wild.
It also shows like how embracing of his role that he is at every level of basketball. Like typically you see someone, and I'll use Drew Eubanks as an example. I think guys look at like a lot of in the NBA, he's very much a role player. In high school, that guy could get buckets. Like there was he was probably the leading scorer on his team at that point. So for Dylan to have that type of mentality of just totally steering into what he is at every level of the game and playing that type of role is pretty impressive, because so many times a lot of these guys that make it to this level are the spotlighted talents on their team.
Even Keon averaged 18 a game his sophomore year at JUCO, for example,
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So you bring up, I was going to just bring up Keon Ellis, and I'll say, like, I think the crazy thing is I think it's easier to be a Dylan Cardwell than it is to be a Max Raynaud. And it's easier to be a Keon Ellis than it is to be a Nick Clifford. When you walk into the league and you have two skills that you're good at, and it's, for Keon, it's playing defense on the perimeter and it's hitting the three ball. With Dylan, he's really good at running at the rim, dunking, and then he's really good on the defensive end. He's also a good rebounder. But when you start to filter in all these other things, like, they're trying to work. Doug kind of said this the other day that, one of the problems they've had with their offense over the last couple of months is without Domas, they don't have the ability to run the DHO game because Max and Dylan aren't ready to do the DHO game yet. And I thought that was really interesting because, first of all, Doug doesn't like to talk about offense at all. But at the same time, it does kind of give you a clue into why their offense has been so limited so far this season. So now we're seeing these moments where they're trying to run some of that stuff with Dylan or with Max, and it just doesn't look right yet. And that's because they're just inexperienced and they don't know what they're doing in that situation. And I'd also point out, like, again, they're long-term college players, both of them, but we're not going to see Max take, 5 or 6 threes in a game this season. We're going to see that next year or the year after that, but it's sort of like the way that you feed a player like him little bits at a time because he is so talented and he's so versatile. But I think it's easier, again, to be a Dylan Cardwell, to go get minutes and to show that you can do what go out and do what you do. And again, same with Keon. And so I think that long term, like, you kind of need both of those players, and you think that Max has a higher ceiling and that, again, Neek might have a higher ceiling than Keon. But in the immediacy, they step on the court, and since they've done, Keon is doing exactly what he did as a high school player and a college player. Again, Dylan's doing exactly what he's done probably all the way back to junior high. It's much simpler for them to step on the court and find a role. That makes sense?
Yep, absolutely. I think, it's pretty much what we've been saying. These I think some guys, like, of all people, Dylan Cardwell will know exactly what his role will be going forward. I don't think there's going to be very many variations of it or even a deviation from it, but undeniably the physicality and the force that he brings to this team is maybe the closest thing to it would be Precious Achiuwa. But that even then, I mean, I think he brings something very unique, and obviously, especially at home, what he's being able to use his antics to fire up the crowd. His teammates really enjoy it. I'm curious how much maybe that runs a course at one point. Like, you setting a screen and celebrating is wild, but it's just who he is, and you always want people to be themselves, and I can see how teammates maybe that grows on, it kind of loses the shine on it after a while. But as a member of the opposition, I'm sure you're really having some thoughts about what he's doing after a block shot or drawing a foul or scoring a bucket, or like I said, even setting a screen.
Are we just too old?
Definitely had some feelings about it. I
Oh.
think that was the first example of pushing him on the
Yeah.
floor, and then Dorian sort of mocked his hyping up the crowd celebration a little bit, and I'm sure there will be more instances of that. But what were you going to say, James? You guys are too old.
Yeah, is it just that we're too old and we don't get it, Brenden?
I mean, I agree. I tend to side with what Sean is saying, that I'm curious more than anything of if it will grow old, and I don't know. There is also the reality of this team isn't good, and it's not like he's been doing it because they're winning games. Like, this has been Dylan all year long, and so,
and back to college for that matter.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. So to your point, it is just who he is. I would be curious as he becomes more established in the NBA, and this is more of a known thing around the league. If we get to that point, then is there some sort of pushback? If he's not doing these at road games, reasonably, understandably so, but like, do we get instances where the opposing big starts doing it when he's playing against Dylan because he's aware that he does this? And like, I don't know. I don't think that I enjoy it. I think it's part of the fun. I think that sometimes, obviously, this is work for these guys. I get why it's taken seriously, but Doug will remind you and other people that this is a game when it comes down to it, and they got to be enjoying themselves a little bit out there. And I think that the apathy Sean mentioned may have set in a little bit earlier. These sort of things do help with that in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it should be. I mean, I'm enjoying seeing him do it. I think there are way too many times where it's like, hey, man, the play's still going, and you shouldn't be doing that while the play's going. Like, you blocked a shot, but they got the ball back, and you're going to have to block another one or get a rebound or something, and I need you to focus first.
Play devil's advocate here for a minute. Let's say he's on the Portland Trailblazers, and you saw that last night. Granted, they won, but like, how are you talking about it at that point? You're talking about it probably with a more critical eye than what it means to Sacramento. And they're two teams. Obviously, Portland's a lot better in the record in the wins column, but two teams that obviously Portland's a lot younger. I don't know. The scenarios might be a little bit different, but I feel like they're similar enough to where that might draw a little bit more ire as opposed to the praise that Kings fans and the like are giving it to what the situation is here in Sacramento.
Yeah. Let's skip to the other thing. We saw Domas come back, and that meant just a different look for the Kings. Again, I think I want to see Domas in a week, maybe 2 weeks, to see how he looks. And again, by that time, Domantas Sabonis may or may not be a Sacramento King. We have no idea. But I certainly think that we're going to see him get better as time goes by and just look more like himself, especially on the defensive end. I think on the defensive end is where you saw his lack of mobility and strength in the leg so far. It just like he just got pushed around and didn't really have the ability to stay in front of anyone. But let's skip to the other guy that all of a sudden started playing really well. And then, with Dennis Schroeder out, I think Malik Monk has had like his best run as a King of late this season. And now that Dennis is back, I'm kind of the opinion that I want to see them switch roles and have Monk be the primary ball handler on the second unit and direct traffic and, find Dennis for open looks. Where are you guys at with that? Because to me, I think to capitalize on who Monk is, you need to let him create for others and for himself. And he's been electric. He had the 8 assist game. And I want to see more of that from Malik.
I think for me, seeing him out there playing the role that he also is incredibly helpful to your 3-point shooting, which without him, just makes you a non-factor in a way from the perimeter outside of really Zach. I mean, shout out Debo for really being a guy who's been able to knock down threes this season. He's been so efficient.
And Russ. Shooting
yeah,
36%.
sure, in moments. Boy, yeah, okay. But I mean, I will say this: like, even having somebody like Malik out there who's a little bit more of a threat should make all those guys better in what they can bring from the perimeter as well. So, in terms of ball handling, man, I just think they have a number of guys that are capable of maybe not being a primary option at your point guard position, but even someone like Domas, who I trust to bring the ball up in the open court. I know some people kind of bristle at when he does it. I don't. I kind of like the results more times than not. But I think especially having Domas back, I think that helps your offense, especially with the two-man game that he has. I mean, he doesn't play it any better with anybody than Malik Monk. So, yeah, I think those two kind of coincide with a little bit of success for them, and it looks better. I don't know about totally taking the ball out of Schroeder's hands, because I think he has played very well this season off the bench. But yeah, I guess we'll see. I haven't really thought about that in terms of maybe who needs to hold the ball. I think Malik has just really filled in admirably since they went back to him. I think the turnovers are still a little bit of a problem, but I think the turnover issue with Malik Monk is a lot more elevated when it comes to him than somebody like Russell Westbrook, who kind of does the same thing.
Yeah, actually, Russ is much worse at it. Go ahead, Brenden.
Yeah, Malik's had some games with that as well. I think your point of him, how he plays with Domas, definitely has stood out these last two games. There's not very much effective, I would say, like smooth-looking pick and roll game from the Kings throughout the course of this year. And Malik and Domas just get straight into that, whether it's even DHO or pick and roll, that pocket pass. Malik's really good at hitting there. Sometimes may throw a lob a little bit too high every once in a while and things like that. But I think the shooting he provides, it's easy to see why he belongs out there. And I think that from what Doug has said, I'm sure he's focused on the defensive end and some of the things that Malik may lack there. I think their shell defense and the amount of times that Malik or another one of these guards, there's 4 guard lineups yesterday, like you guys have mentioned, end up in that low man spot and having to protect the rim. Like, obviously Malik's just not going to be good at that. And I think that you see shortcomings there a little bit, but offensively, he's certainly helped their team. And I think a major part of why they managed to roll off 4 in a row is because, if you, even including last night's game, last 5 games, they're shooting 44% from 3. And this is not a good 3-point shooting team. They are actually a bad 3-point shooting team throughout the course of this season. And they're 6-3 when they shoot 40% or better from 3. Like, this is, it helps when you make shots. And I think that obviously you could get deeper than that, but I do think that is the most basic aspect of why they have managed to win games recently. And the Lakers couldn't make a shot to save their life. The Knicks could not shoot to save their life. I think some of these teams, they did kind of get a little bit fortunate, but it's a credit to the Kings, because another thing Malik and Domas specifically, as Domas has been back these last 2 games, I think that pace has been a lot higher. I know the numbers don't quite show it out, but I think when they do manage to get stopped, Sean mentioned it, he can get a board and run himself. I love when he's able to do that. And a lot of times when you have Domas out there, maybe Dylan would be the only one where you don't feel like he can grab a board and take it himself. I guess that's one of the pros of having all these ball handlers, even if there's maybe one too many cooks in the kitchen at times. So I think that Malik's 3-point shooting, playmaking, ability to play with pace, and Domas plays into that for sure, has very much factored into this win streak. But more than anything, again, more layers to it. But I think the most fundamental thing is that they've been hitting a lot of threes over these last 5 games, and other teams are struggling to shoot.
Yeah, it's interesting. Golden One Center is one of the best shooting gyms in the league. I mean, it's just proven out to be that way. For whatever reason, teams shoot the lights out. Part of it's because the Kings have historically been bad defensively, especially defending the 3-point shot. But it doesn't matter. It's some sort of backdrop issue that the Kings have, that other teams just hit the 3 ball against them. Watching the Knicks, I think they started 1 of 22 from 3. Like, they were a total disaster from long range. And so sometimes that's the way it goes. I do think that, like, you guys brought up the pick and roll. I think it's interesting. The Kings have, they have such different pick and roll players, because Max likes to sit back a little bit in the pick and roll for like a drop pass that a little bit reminiscent of Rashawn Holmes, just from where he shoots. And then you've got Domas, who likes the pocket pass, like right in the middle of everyone, where he just like uses his strength to blow through everybody. And then you've got Dylan Cardwell, who, he's not a true like pick and roll guy yet, but he's finding like the weak side dunker spot just to be somewhere that he can live. And he's like a highlight reel guy. So I think it's interesting. The guards are having to play with different players and very different types, styles of like finishers near the rim and the three primary guys. And then, you brought up the guys that can bring the ball up the court. I've been super impressed with Precious, not just, his rebounding and his defense, but he doesn't have any problem grabbing the ball and racing up court with it. He also doesn't have any problem like taking somebody off the dribble and going right to the rim. I've been just as a player, I'm still stunned that he wasn't on a roster like into November. To me, like there are a lot of guys in the league that aren't very good at basketball and are, whether they're developmental guys or you tall guys that just happen to play basketball. And you haven't figured that out yet, but man, Precious does a lot. He can shoot the three, he can rebound, he can defend at least 3 or 4 positions. Where are you guys at with him? And like, do you think there's a possibility that he's going to be someone that they look to keep around longer?
I think, yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily think they're going to go out of their way to try to look to trade him. I think they feel like they got value for what they want at, what they got him at. So, yeah, he's definitely lived up to it. I would argue that he's probably been Scott Perry's best addition. Outside, I mean, I don't know if I can say the draft, but I think since Scott Perry's been in control, that was his biggest offseason acquisition in a way. I mean, it's the one that's paid off the most. So I'd even say too, just look at Nick Clifford. I think you're going to start to see him in a position to be a little bit more of a player with the ball in his hands because let's face it, this is going to be about development going forward pretty soon. And I think once you get through trade deadline and things like that, you'll probably see him in a position to do the same.
Meaning clearing some space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just being able to, when he's on the floor too, to maybe be a primary ball handler in spaces in different sets.
Yeah. I think and I'll get back to Precious, but I think Neek has been a little bit concerning throughout the course of this year. He's probably been the worst rookie out of all of the guys. And I don't think it's the most conducive environment for him, like the same way that I don't think Keon has been very good in his minutes out there this year. I think that if you place them in more settings that maybe this isn't the best for their long-term development in like Neek's case, for example, and to your point of that becoming a focus, but if he had a more defined role of like the clear fifth starter, I think that things could look a lot cleaner for him throughout the course of this season, albeit that the shot hasn't looked very good. And I think there are concerning things, I guess, throughout the course of this season for a guy that you took in the late lottery, but I think, towards the end of the first round. But I do think that Precious, to go back to him, has been pretty good this year. I'd be curious to see what sort of contract he's playing himself into as he's an expiring contract coming into this year. And I think that he's showing that he belongs in the NBA at the very least. Like he is switchable. Let him tell it. He thinks he can guard 1 to 5. There's nights where he's out there and assigned to, he was guarding Jalen Brunson to start that Knicks game, and I think there's other moments where he's played the 5 this year. So he really has defended every single position. And maybe that's not exactly what you want to have to require from him. But say you have the optionality with him and Keegan Murray out there and Dylan Cardwell, it's like, okay, you start to see a solid defense. You put Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis. I don't know about the offense of that group, but you could put together a solid defensive group, for example. And I think that the big part of Precious is he gives you a lot of lineup optionality. You could play him 3 to 5. He can defend pretty much every position, like I just mentioned. And yeah, the 3-point shooting isn't the greatest. I think spacing overall with this team is obviously one of their flaws, but I think that he has shown that he for sure belongs in the NBA. And I don't know about you guys, but I have also really enjoyed talking to him. And I think he tends to get along with his teammates pretty well.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Yeah, he's chill, super, super nice, super respectful. I'm like, I did not think I would be a Precious Achiuwa fan when they signed him. I thought it would be just like another one of the other, middle of the road signings that they did this offseason, but I think it's really turned out nice. And even long term, you can see him, being part of the young group, which is good because he can be a leader with those guys. He can help them, and he's a good person, which helps. So I'm intrigued there. All right, we're careening towards the NBA trade deadline, and lots of craziness is going to happen between now and February 5th, whether it's in Sacramento or around the league. And I think we're starting to see more and more stuff. Like when it comes to the Keon Ellis situation, I don't personally think that there's a way that Keon Ellis is a member of the Sacramento Kings after February 5th. And if he is, I would honestly believe that that was a bit of a mistake. But where are you guys at with Keon and just like the way that this season has played out, whether you think he'll be with the group or not moving forward with him being an unrestricted free agent this summer?
I'll just start by saying that I don't think Keon has been very good this year, and his role definitely plays a part in that. I think back to when he got drafted, and I've mentioned this before, but him talking about how the draft combine was just a bad setting for him. I think that, funnily enough, this team plays similarly to that with the amount of ball handlers and self creators that they have on this team. So you could definitely, I think other teams could rationalize it with, hey, it's the Kings. Look at the role he's played this year, how inconsistent it's been. But the reality is he has not been very good this year. And so I'd be curious what that means value wise. But the point that they've already reached with him, like we've talked about plenty, I think that if I'm him, why would you stay here? And you probably have a better opportunity somewhere else. Don't know what that market might necessarily look like when it comes to salary, but I think he could be a solid contributor on a team that is trying to go places and a really good fifth starter. If you place him alongside one of these high usage ball handlers, the Jokic, Luka, Giannis, like I think he looks great next to these guys, for example. We're a very defined role. Hey, we want you to guard ones and twos. And I think that's, for what it's worth, also an important part of like the value of Keon. He's very much hyped up as a defender, as he deserves, right? But it's mainly off-ball defense. It's all the deflections that he gets and mucking up the game. I do think he gets blown by fairly often defensively, but he has really good recovery, right? And you see him make a lot of plays doing that. But yeah, he's not great at keeping the guy in front of him. You don't see him. I mean, Davion Mitchell is a prime example of guys that are the best in the league at this, right? But Davion's chesting up guys and they're not getting past him. Like, you're not seeing that from Keon. Keon's a little bit just more thin. If you put him on Luka, which we've seen throughout the course of this year, Luka's going to cook him. Luka is too big for Keon to be able to guard, for example. But I do think there is still a lot of value there. And I'd be curious, just considering all that, what they could get for him at the trade deadline. But I do think it is time to move on because, again, he holds all the cards here with the ability to go into unrestricted free agency. And if I'm him, I think it's easy logic to be like, why would I stick around given how the past few years have gone? Multiple coaches that aren't really giving him that much opportunity or very inconsistent opportunity. And I think it's just probably best to part ways. But he's a very interesting evaluation to me.
Sean?
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of the stuff that you see from Keon this season is two things. One, the team isn't very good. That also presents quite the opportunity that was ahead of him to show what he can do from an offensive standpoint, because I think everyone already knows what he can do defensively. I think the steal numbers are obviously something that obviously makes people think that he's this terrific defender. But as you outlined, it's like the on-ball stuff is not as strong. I also think he does it on purpose to be able to take the to take the risk to get the steal, to get the backside steal after he gets blown by, and that's just not really an attribute of a really good defender. That being said, though, I think he has. I still don't like him with the ball in his hands, but I think he has made some strides there. The corner three is obviously the best thing he can do offensively, but I think his splits are not very great right now. I would leave that more towards the team not being very good and just having a poor mix. But I'll say this, like, yes, would it make most sense if you're looking at all the guards outside of maybe Zach, who has a terrible contract, DeRozan, who has an interesting style of play for a team that isn't going anywhere, and also is old. And then you look, like, if you're asking me, it's like, is it Malik or is it Keon? Well, you're keeping Malik. I mean, Malik has tremendous more upside. It helps winning more. There's an infectious style of play there, so I can understand that. The other part is that if he doesn't get moved, I can still see an extension for Keon Ellis. And even if he gets an extension for Keon Ellis, that doesn't mean he's part of your long-term plans, because it just makes good basketball sense to do so, to be able to move him. But I think what people, they hear us being critical of Keon Ellis, and then they hear stuff about how attractive he is around the league. I don't think what people, when the casual fan hears that, they don't understand that he's attractive around the league because he makes no money. And so the value there is extremely high. And then you get to be able to put him in a situation where even if you have to give him a contract, he's yours. I mean, this is, you're able to mold a situation for him, a best sought out role for him. We're here in Sacramento, and I still think it's a success story. You've gone from undrafted to two-way player, summer league to two-way player to roster player, and here you are trying to look for your next contract. And you had that Gabe Vincent contract, which is going from a two-way player to now a roster player. So when you ascend and take these strides that are bigger than what a two-way player can be, for a couple of years, it gets a little wonky. So not to speak out both sides of my mouth, but I think anything can happen with Keon Ellis. I would not be surprised if he's traded. I would not be surprised if he's here in a Kings uniform even next year. So he's an interesting one to kind of talk about right now, because most of these other players you're looking at and saying, well, this person's not in the long-term plans for sure. And he's one of the guys that I think just has a little bit of an X around him.
Yeah, I'm going to take a slightly stronger stance and just make the statement. I do not think he'll be here at all. Because there's one thing, like the blessing that is Keon Ellis is that he makes $2 million and it's a league minimum deal. And so if you were to trade him, almost every team in the league that's not above like the second apron and hard capped, they can take on a minimum scale contract without even giving anything back. So I think the Kings are going to be able to get a late first round pick for him. Worst case scenario, I think they'd be able to get like 2 seconds, but a late first round pick. And I don't think they're going to have a problem doing that. And for a team like the Kings, like Keon Ellis, I love him as a player, but you're not good enough. Your system isn't good enough right now to support him and to really like give him the leg up that he needs. Right now, like everybody is asked to do too much or does too much on this team when they are in the game, and there is no real flow. And I also like, look, it's one thing for Keon Ellis to be in and out of the rotation when he's making $2 million. It's a whole other thing if you're gonna have to pay him 10 or 12 million bucks, 14 million, and all of a sudden he's in and out of your rotation, then you look like the fool. And so I don't think he'll be here. And I think it's a bummer, but I also look at it as I think he's a very nice asset to have going into the trade deadline. And whether you use him to go get a first round pick or you use him sort of as a first round pick to sweeten a trade where you're maybe trading away a Malik or a DeMar or, Zach LaVine and Keon's part of that, I think all of those things are on the table. So,
which honestly, I think would be a good outcome for the Kings if they manage to obviously get a first round pick. Like I think that is great asset management, and part of when you're in this rebuilding, retooling stage, I think you need to capitalize on peak value for players, and we might be at that current point with Keon. So they got a lot of crap for how they handled the entire situation. Some justified for sure, but if you make out of it with a first round pick for Keon, I think that's a great scenario for the current state of the team.
Yeah, you would have been turning an undrafted into a first round pick,
right? Potentially,
and I would be surprised, to be honest. I honestly would be surprised if they get a first round pick for Keon. I don't. Two things. I don't think that this team is going to attach draft capital to any of their bloated contracts to get them off the team. But Keon is a sweetener for where he's at. But I also feel there's a little bit of that Kuminga aspect where it's, if you're interested in Kuminga, just go get him, or Keon, just go get him in the offseason. You don't necessarily have to bring him onto your team to be able to be in. Like if he's the apple of your eye and you want to go get him, just go get him. You don't have to trade for him ahead of time.
The one advantage is that he does come with his Larry Bird rights.
Correct.
So because he's been with the Kings for 3 years, if you trade him, he is Bird eligible, which means that a team that's over the cap can sign him without regards to the cap.
No, great point.
All right, so we've got to have an abbreviated podcast today. I've got to go get on the air. We've been bouncing around trying to figure out days to do this. Sean made a nice trip up to Seattle to watch really bad football. And
on one side of the ball.
Yeah, me and Brennan have been running around covering a bajillion Kings games because this is the busiest schedule I've ever seen in the month of January. I mean, it's crazy. We've been at the arena almost every day. So let's get to final thoughts. Brennan, what do you got for us? Final thoughts.
I am curious to watch the national championship game. Easy final thought, but yeah, I'm gonna see Raiders' future quarterback. Is that what we're thinking here? And give my dad a hard time if he just totally stinks it up. But they've been whooping ass through the whole tournament, and
he's a winner.
He is. Yeah, a little bit of Dylan Cardwell vibes, not in the energy, but in how they present themselves. I think in interviews and things like that for the most part. But yeah, curious to see how that plays out. I've been watching more college sports in general recently, whether it's football or locked in on Darren Peterson, AJ, and some of these guys. I know that Scott and Alvin were just at a Cal game against Duke and seeing Cam Boozer over there. Sean, what do you think of Kevin Love for a Cam Boozer comp?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were asking me what did I think about them playing ACC teams in California. That sucks. Fair. Stupid. And I'm also bitter that I wasn't able to get to any of those games because of the work schedule. But nevertheless,
UNC coming up.
I know. Yeah. I was in Charlotte. I had a layover in Charlotte after the Philly game, which is a very terrible layover to have. And noticed that you walk into their little sports shop in the airport, and it's like, here's a lot of Carolina Panthers. Here's some Duke and North Carolina almost split the same kiosk, and a very little section is NC State, and I felt bad for them. But anyway, yeah, Cam. I like what I've seen from Cam at times. He's clearly the more talented brother of the other one of the two, and he's got a lot of room to grow. But some of the stuff he does, he has a nice little touch. I mean, he's a talented player. I like some other guys better. I mean, I watch Domantas almost every chance I get. I mean, that's a lot of his size at that position is just really, really remarkable. So I think he's probably the one that's caught my eye the most. But my final thoughts really just seeing the Niners season come to an end. I know there's a lot of Niner fans who are bitter. I mean, this is an overachieving team. Guys, I've been in a lot of locker rooms where seasons come to an end, and it's a somber place to be. It wasn't that somber. Like, I'm not saying that they were thrilled with the victory, with the loss and seeing their season come to an end, but it was almost kind of like, yeah, Trent Williams literally said we had guys literally this season coming off the street to play football for us, and they had just promoted 2 people from practice squad. It's like, you can only do that for so long. I'm surprised they were able to do it as long as they did. And kudos for them for doing it. I actually like what this sets up for the future. I think they have some options there. But I think Niner fans should hold their heads high. They lost to a better team. Seattle is incredible. I don't love them on offense, and they just lost their running back. But the Rams have been the team I've kind of thought the most highly of for most of this season. So we'll see where it goes.
All right. Final thoughts from me. I don't have a ton. It's been a wild couple of weeks. Like, I don't remember this many games. It was like 6 games in 9 days or something at home.
It's not that bad. You get it every year.
It is that bad. It is that bad. Like, at least they won 4 of them. I don't know. Outside of that, like, I think it's going to be a bumpy couple of weeks. I think there are going to be player movements. I don't know if it's going to be as exciting as everybody hopes with a ton of players moving. But I do think that there are going to be trades, and some of those players are players that you hold near and dear to your heart. So it's going to be tough. All right. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. Jump on board Kings Beat, go to kingsbeat.com, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, do all that stuff, rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back next week with another podcast, unless there's something that happens and we have to have an emergency pod between now and next week. So for KCRA 3, Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast, I'm James Hammond, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat.
Oh, I already blew
Bye.
my candle.